If you like history, then the Cherry Mansion next to the Tennessee River in Savannah is definitely a place to visit.
It was built in 1830 by a man who owned a lot of our county, David Robinson, and then he gave the house to his daughter for a wedding present, which was kind of a nice thing, and she married a man named William Cherry, so that's how the house has gotten the name the Cherry Mansion, or the Cherry House that it's still known as.
William Cherry grew cotton and reportedly had thousands of acres in the bottomland west of the Tennessee River. He owned a fleet of steamships for transporting his cotton to markets along the river. This beautiful home, which stands watch above the bank of the Tennessee River, is now lovingly cared for by Anthony and Mary Ann Gilchrist.
My dad bought the house from a Cherry descendant in 1934. The house was dilapidated, it was about to be torn down, and he was such a history lover, and he had grown up in this neighborhood, so it was kind of a labor of love on his part to restore the house. And so then he died in 1985, and my mom died this past November, and now Anthony and our two boys and I have kind of taken over. We live next door and here. We kind of split our time.
In the 1800s, the river was the center of commerce, and a ferry operated just a short distance to the north. The mansion's front door opened to the river, the property framed by a stone wall, with guests arriving through a gated archway and ascending terraced steps. Today, this is considered the back of the house and referred to as the river porches.
We spend a lot of time on the river porches. We enjoy this is my favorite part of the house, is the river porches, and we spend a lot of time out here having our meals and just sitting and relaxing and looking at the river. It's very nice.
Town became a bigger deal than the river over time, and by the time I came along, that was the front porch. So now it's confusing. My boys, when I say on the front porch, they'll say, which one is that? You know, so, but actually town is now where the action is, so that somehow just evolved into the front of the house.
It's easy to imagine the original view. The still operable well and the Cherry family's carriage house remain on the east side of the property. The draw for many visitors is the mansion's thick Civil War history, particularly around the Battle of Shiloh. Cherry Mansion served as the Union headquarters, first hosting General C.F. Smith, who was hurt in a boating accident and replaced by General Ulysses S. Grant.
He came here by invitation. Mr. Cherry was a Union man. He was a loyalist, and so he had offered the house. He had written a letter to Washington and offered the house, and it was in a good location, being on the river. And so when the war moved this direction from Nashville, they knew they were coming to the Cherry house. They were coming as invited guests. Mr. Cherry was a great businessman, and some historians say he wasn't so loyal. He was just looking out for his interests. So befriending General Grant meant that his cotton fields would be protected. Some of the Confederates in town didn't like the Cherries, or Mr. Cherry, and they had burned some of his bales of cotton. So General Grant sent troops over to protect the cotton. That was an advantage of having them as house guests.
Mary Ann says her view of Grant and the Northern officers has mellowed a bit over the years as she has learned more about them.
He would escort these Southern ladies to town, and he would take his uniform jacket off, or even dress in street clothes so they wouldn't be embarrassed to be with a mean old Yankee soldier. Ms. Cherry said he was always the gentleman. General W.H.L. Wallace was wounded at Shiloh, and they brought him over by boat and put him in they called it the library at the time, and he lived for about 3 more days, and just coincidentally his wife had traveled down to Savannah for a visit with him, so she happened to be here with him when he died. So she has written about being in the Cherry Mansion. And the other general, C.F. Smith, I mentioned earlier, he fell off of his boat and got a bad injury and died in one of the upstairs bedrooms. He and General Grant had a real friendship, so they were together during his final days. So those are two interesting history stories.
Still, there's a slight grin of delight as she talks about the shenanigans in the basement.
Under the dining room floor is a little cellar, and you can hear through the floor, and they tell Mr. Cherry, although he was a Union man, his wife's family were real good Confederates, and they tell that she and her sisters would hide under the dining room floor while General Grant and his staff were making plans and talking about the war, and if they heard significant information, they had a trusted servant that would sneak out in the middle of the night and take this to the Confederate camp. So that's a fun spy story.
She used to spy herself. She and her friends used to spy on her parents from the same spot when she was.
Yeah, we had to check out that theory. You really can hear through the floor. I can vouch for that.
Unfortunately, Grandma's rule still applies. No one gets to see the attic or the basement. Inside the house is an interesting mix of memories from the 19th and 20th centuries. Original wood floors, 18-inch thick walls, the table where General Grant issued his orders, and a television that would have brought Milton Berle into the room.
The piano was the first one in our city. In fact, it was the first one in Hardin County, and they brought it into the room in parts and assembled it in here. They added the legs, the pedals, so now it won't go back through the doorway. So I feel like it'll be here when we're not. It's here to stay. At nighttime, Miss Cherry, one of her sisters, played the piano, and the Confederate girls would sing their Confederate tunes to the Union officers, and they joined in sometimes and sang along. They were good sports.
Cherry Mansion has been carefully restored and remodeled over the years. It had one large closet upstairs, which is now the bathroom. Homes in the 1800s had very few closets because they were taxed as additional rooms. The mansion has no hidden passageways, but it was Mary Ann's childhood home, and she knows all the great hiding places.
The bathhouse on the terrace back here, I hid in there one night. It was my birthday party, and I got locked in by myself, and the party just went on without me. You know, I felt kind of left out of my birthday, but there were a lot of great trees to climb and lots of hideouts. Our sons help with the tours sometimes, and I was telling a group that I got to slide on it, but that my boys never did, and they said, "That's what you think." So it's had a lot of traffic.
Like any good story, there's a bit of infamy to tell, and some bloodstains on the floor to prove it.
In about 1870, the Methodist Church had a big party down here, and there was a shootout in one of the bedrooms, and one man was killed, and the other man got to escape by boat on the river. He was never seen again, so it was quite a story.
And how about things that go bump in the night?
There are ghost stories. I've never encountered a ghost, but I think if you believe, then you can find a ghost. We had a neighbor who thought he had seen some ghosts a time or two down here. So if you're open to that, I think you could meet a ghost. 3 different, well, I told you about the shootout in the house. That was one death, and then 2 of the Civil War generals also died in the house. So there's, you know, a possibility of some spirits roaming around.
Ghosts or not, touring the mansion and strolling around the grounds is a real treat, and the Gilchrists are wonderful hosts. You can enjoy an entire day exploring the rich history of Savannah.
We're opening up tours when there's special days like at Shiloh and Memorial Day weekend, or when there's something special going on in the area. We will open it up to the public, you know, for a couple of days. But most of it is done by appointments, where people call and we set up appointments for groups of 8 or more people. And
for more information about Cherry Mansion, you can call them on the phone or visit their website at www.cherrymansion.com.
When something's gone, it's gone. You know, you can't rebuild an old house. You just have to save the ones that are here, and we have a lot of people in our town that have done that. We have a historic district, and that's important to keep the history alive.